East Coast of the United States. I have no idea what time it is down and under, but it is time for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. So I hope you have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mecky. Yay.
Bit of reverb there, I love it. We're on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio. Who knew? Where it's more than just radio, so jump in the chat room if you can. I really mean that. You should do it. This is show number 312.
210 and 300.
Which, if I do my maths, Mecky, 52. Sorry,
I can smell something burning.
Can That's very funny. Okay, so yeah, very funny. So 312 divided by 52, and I'm using a calculator because my head doesn't seem to work. And guess what we get? Guess what? This is 6
312.
years. No, 6 years.
On the air?
Yeah.
Nice.
This is the beginning of the 6th year.
That's
I sort of...
Wow.
I know, I'm taken aback as well. You know. But you know what, Mecky? It's online, on air, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen from anywhere. You don't just have to be living in Kentucky to get it on WZZR. You can be global or, in fact, even extraterrestrial. Be on the ISS. He can tweet from up there, so he can listen to Revolution Radio. That's my point right there. And if you don't think that's enough freedom, well, you can get access to the show archives. All of the archives, in fact, at the station are available for only $5.95 a month. That's it. That's all it costs. A cup of coffee. Or you can get a small coffee in like a bagel or something. And if you missed it, Solaris' show is awesome. Yet again, no surprise there. She had Cassandra Vizant on, and they were talking about ETs and psychic readings. I love it. I just love it. It's, you know, if you don't know who we're talking about, Solaris, what you need to do is jump into the chat room. Sorry, jump into the archives. Otherwise, you're missing out. Go and do it. Now, Mecky and I, both of us, where we live is different. We live geographically separated from each other.
Separated.
You gotta keep them separated. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it's the Darkinyung.
And the Daruk in Pemulwuy.
Nice. And we pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future. And let us remember that beneath our houses, concrete roads, and buildings and lands, which have had stories passed down for about 240,000 generations of people. That's amazing, isn't it? Find out how many generations there have been where you live. And it might give you a greater respect for the land we live on. Mecky, boy, can you believe that a whole week has gone past since the last show?
Hard to believe, but yeah, time flew by, I think. So it's funny, you have these anchors during the week. I mean, points that are not unchangeable, but certainly don't change as much as other things. This show here is one of those, or has been for the last 6 years for me on a Sunday, even though it moves with daylight saving, but it's an anchor point. You go, okay, can you reflect now? You reflect on the week that was. There aren't that many anchor points left because your days tend to blend into one another, especially if you're working, family, traveling, working, family, traveling. Your days blend, but it's nice to have these little highlights or points where you can just be still and then just think. So just before the show starts, I take a few moments to think about things. Maybe just have a quick look at the notes, if I can catch Solaris' show. And Solaris, as Pete. You're not Pete, you're Dave, as Dave has said. What? Well, what's Pete doing here now? No, as Dave has said, thank you very much for bringing great shows every week to this network. It's awesome, and thank you very much. Every week, Solaris wishes us well. Did you know that? Every week, she takes the time to send us a little message, hoping that we have a great show. I think that's nice. She doesn't have to, yeah, but she does. It's awesome. It's a little bit of the ethos we're trying to promote here. I think not officially. It's not like a corporate, logo or corporate action or statement. Nothing like that. It's really just how people are here at the station. I think it's in a similar fashion. Normally Gerber rather is on after us, so we try to give him a shout out as well, because this is an ungodly hour. It's for you guys. I mean, in Australia, because as Nighthawk always says, I have no idea what time it is down under. Well, it is actually 6 p.m. It is 6 p.m. in your future. It's Sunday, March 4th, 6 p.m. And that moves to 4 p.m. When our daylight and and the winter saving times coincide. So it moves from 4, then to 5 for a little bit, then to 6, and then back for 6, then to 5 and 4 again. So it sort of fluctuates for us in the late afternoon. For you guys overseas, like in the States specifically, where the station is actually broadcasting from, even though it's on the line, the actual studios are in Kentucky.
Yes.
That's why we're there. WZZR, right? It's night. It's in fact 2 a.m. or something like that, just after 2 a.m. I think, over there, or something like that. So it's if you're listening to the replay, then I hope that this catches you at a better time. But I do give everybody a shout out that's listening live, as we are, especially to the people in the chat room. It's awesome to have you guys on with us. It's really awesome to get feedback in the chat. You see that's what happens. There's easily 20, 30 people in the chat. There's more, but actively chatting, and it's great to get that feedback as the show progresses, and then get some feedback at the end of the show as well. That is nice, because in the broadest sense of the word, Dave and I are performers, right? Coming here on stage for you, hopefully with some interesting information, maybe some banter, and hopefully filling your 2 hours, even though they're between the 2 and 4 a.m. time slots there, with some fun. And again, if it's a replay or you listen to this on YouTube, you can choose your own time, of course. Well, we do hope that we can make these hours as fun and informative as possible. And since today is a milestone, meaning 6 years, I just want to quickly spend 2 seconds on the ethos. The mission statement, that's the word I was looking for earlier, the corporate mission statement of the show. Our corporate mission statement. we used to play bingo, corporate word bingo. It's actually really fun. I'll tell you guys some more about that in the future. But our mission statement for the show, Shiny Side Out, is we want to bring you a whole bunch of information, right? But not unstructured. There's always a method to our madness, and like Bhutan. In Bhutan, Dave just messaged me. In Bhutan, do you know what the most important national output is? Product?
No.
Happiness.
Oh.
It is happiness in Bhutan. If you want to go into a country where they care about your happiness, move to Bhutan. Anyway.
Thanks for that. I did not know that.
Right. Look. There you go. It's interesting little fact there. No, but the thing is, we do try to structure it, and in fact, if you've been listening to the show, for let's say for some time, then you would have known that we're doing something, or we're talking about something called the hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis is the overarching reason for the show. It is our worldview, our Weltanschauung, if you will, right? It's in line with the Zeitgeist. We have a lot of information that needs to be expressed. So it's very difficult for Dave or even myself to explain to someone what we believe. So people come, oh, Mackie, what do you actually believe? What do you think is happening? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like, I can tell you what I believe. In a few sentences, I can say it to you, right? I can. It's not an issue at all. It takes 5 minutes to really get you across that. But the problem is you're going to look at me like I'm insane.
Because,
right? Because I have
what they don't get is the how.
Yeah,
how did
exactly.
we get to that point?
And that's what this show has been an invaluable vehicle for. Because I've been trying to write a book for the better part of 20 years. And like I said to Dave, I think some time ago, maybe during the show, spent a lot of time putting show notes together, right? We now have, Dave, I think we have the actual folder on my computer contains, I don't want to lie here, but let me see. I think it's about 200 documents that are contained in the folder, right? So that's let me get the information here. I'm on an Apple. so
just allow the indulgence. Some of those show notes, some of the early ones are much shorter, but say 35 to 80 pages long.
Yeah, 239 items. There are 239 items. Now you're right, and some are longer, some are shorter. Now 230. But we got 312 shows. How's that possible? Well, a lot of the shows that we do go over more than one show, right? There's a show cycle. And Dave is right. Now, the longest show we ever put together was for the flood myths. We put together 100 A4 pages of show notes for that particular gem. That was so much information. To be honest, that's probably the show where I learned the most.
Agreed.
Just raw information, right? And so it's become this amazing compilation of facts and research material, which is really brilliant. And I have to apologize. I haven't had any time to update the webpage. But the point here is, unless you have that background information and 240 documents. Now, if every document on average had, say, let's say 20 pages. It's more, but let's say 20 pages, right? That's 4,000 pages, right? Giving you just a rough math here. That's 4,000 pages of stuff that you need to read.
An almanac series.
Well, it is, right?
Yeah.
But truthfully, and there's probably more, but truthfully, you probably have to read at least that much to understand why we think the way things are the way they are, right? The hypothesis, the cage we're in. It is those 4,000 pages. Once you've read them, of course, you can come to your own conclusions about that. That's all goodness. But you may go, oh, wow. The funny thing is this, though. This is really the funny thing. We've had a lot of awesome guests here, right? Including, of course, Solaris, right? And we talked to these guys and some big names, Jim Mars, Lloyd Pye, Stanton Friedman, yeah, Laura Eisenhower. I mean, I don't want to run through all of them, but every last guest, every single one has been very special to us. And we really appreciate the time they've spent with us. The funny thing is this. Virtually all of them, not every one, of course, because there are different fields of research they engaged in, but funnily enough, they all, especially the ones that have done this for a long time, like Jim Mars or Lloyd Pye, have come to very similar conclusions to us, right? So between Dave and I, we probably have 80 years of research, right? That sounds crazy, but it's true. And it's interesting how other people coming from completely different backgrounds, completely different parts of the world, right? People that we would have never met unless we had this common interest here, or as we do. People whose books I've read since I was a child, and they have now talked to us. Now they have all come to very similar conclusions. Well, I'm not saying it's exactly all the same. Of course, never. But the framework, the mindset, the gestalt is very, very similar, which is in fact that yes, things are not quite as we think they should be or have been taught they are, right? We're not in Kansas anymore, definitely not. And it looks like we're living in some kind of absolutely, we're living in some kind of matrix-like arrangement. It's possible, right? I mean, there's a lot of evidence that points to that, but probably beyond that. I mean, where we are, we can only approximate. Like, we can only give an approximate description of where we think we are, because we don't understand all the ins and outs of the entire framework of we are, because we simply haven't advanced that or enough. But we can see enough to see glimpses, right? There's this, reincarnation. Oh, what's this? Elite bloodlines. Okay, immortals. That's interesting. Well, white gold powder. What's going on there? Telomeres. Oh, that's another odd thing. And as you you some quantum this and quantum that. Decoherence. What's all that about? Really? Interesting too. Double slit experiment. The most crucial, in my opinion, the most crucial physics experiment.
Pivotal.
Yeah, completely. Right? There's no other physics experiment ever that I'm aware of that carries as much into the nature of reality as the double slit experiment. Illuminate us on a very interesting concept. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, look, with all of those 4,000 pages, and the 80 years of research that Mekki and I cumulatively have put together, one of those things that is so easy to fall into, I mean, really is. You'd agree, Mekki? It's so easy to fall into the trap of confirmation bias. Now, if you don't know what it is, it just means where you only accept things or information or clues or facts that support your way of thinking, your hypothesis. So, if you're about to say, let's say you're about to perform an experiment, and Schrödinger's or just the cat, or whether it's you want to see if mice how mice get made. Okay, so this was a real experiment, and you put the instructions are you wrap a loaf of bread in a tea towel, put it in a box, and put that under the bed for 2 weeks. And after checking that after 2 weeks, you'll notice that mice had been created from thin air and ate their way out of the box, leaving a hole and no more mice. That was the experiment. It seems preposterous to us today, right? But confirmation bias led them to conclude that made mice. Today, we see that differently. We see, well, clearly they didn't watch the mouse chew into the box, eat the bread and leave, saying thank you very much for the lovely bread you left behind. But confirmation bias was what trapped the person who made that experiment. Now, that's very easy to get stuck into that, and luckily we've been able to have, in some cases, some robust conversations with naysayers or people with an opposing opinion. But what we find more often than not is that the information that we've come to a conclusion because of the information that's been presented to us, which we are happy to change our mind should that arise. And the best example, and as a result of this conclusion, we've put together we've formulated an idea. Okay, so the Black Knight satellite, I have to conclude that confirmation bias would lead you to believe that it is real. However, when presented with all of the information, you would lead to it not being real. So I have to say confirmation bias is leading people down the flat earth way of thinking without looking at the contradictory information, the science behind it, and that would lead you back away from it. So this is the tough thing. So the reason why I brought up confirmation bias, because I did mention it, Mackie, when we had my solo show. And I just wanted people to understand that when you're making your critical thought, when you're experiencing critical thought, when you've been bombarded every day with all of the things that surround you from all the media outlets, because if you think you live in today's world and you're not, you're not being influenced by media, think again, because you are. Whether you only use Facebook or you don't use Facebook and you're clever the way you interpret all of the news inputs, you're still being influenced by them and by what they're presenting to you. And there's a great bunch of information that's come out this week, just while I had the talking stick, and that is Russia's hypersonic missile ratchets up arms race is the story. Hypersonic, awesome. So we can go around the planet. There's no stopping point. Go around the planet, hit anything, anywhere, and it's steerable because it's basically a cruise missile. It's hypersonic at 7,400 kilometers per hour, or 4.6 thousand miles per hour. Unstoppable, apparently. Steerable, so all of the missile defense systems won't work against it. Okay, thanks for that, Russia. Everyone else is seeing that now as another new threat again. Remember this perpetual war, Mackie? I love the 1984 references that we keep bringing up every week. But if you're not careful, you'll miss them. And this is one of those, to me. Yeah, this is another one. Yet another one. It's a, polarizing, trying to keep you in fear, the whole thing. Do I really care? Not really. All I'm going to care about is if someone uses one of those.
Yes. But the thing is this, though, we have moved back to the 19th century. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, we went through a spat, I want to call it, of globalization. And that didn't go too well, I guess. Some people liked it, some didn't. But overall, a lot of people were feeling a bit queasy about what we've seen is a rolling back of globalism or globalization. And the rolling back started some time ago, when, for example, the Soviet Union fell apart, and as other countries declared independence of larger entities. So all these new countries popped up in Europe, especially, just pop, all these little, even principalities, if you will, right? Really small countries. And it's interesting, and in fact, was it Yemen? No, not Yemen. In Sudan, I think, was it the Sudan? There was there was a country in Africa that was partitioned as well into the north and south recently. So we've seen a fragmentation of nations. That's what we've seen. That's interesting because obviously globalization wanted to go the exact opposite way with the United Nations. One world government, all that wonderful stuff. A complete fantasy at this point, I think. A complete fantasy unless something drastic happens. And maybe good that it's a fantasy. Because you know what was fun about travel when I was a child? It was always different. Different currency, different, food, different this, different that, different shops, different things to buy. Now, I can drop you into a shopping center. Like, one of those, shopping centers, malls, when you call them. Anywhere in the world, and you will have no clue where you are. You will have not the faintest idea. Or maybe some of the goods will give it away. But for the most part, all the shopping centers are the same. I've traveled enough to say this. They all look good. You go outside, there's still a difference, of course, that's good. So we've seen, in my opinion, it's the end of globalization. and the point to from the common market, the European Union, that was huge, massive. There's more now. There's more. We're coming into. Now, Dave mentioned the war rhetoric is heating up. It absolutely is. It is. Yes. People are talking, about posturing and Mr. Trump, President Trump would like a military parade. Look, I got nothing against it. It's interesting that I don't think there's ever been a military parade in the States that I'm aware of. There are lots of them in the eastern nations. But anyway, so yes. This end of globalization and the return to the nation state. President Monroe, couldn't have done a better job himself. He responsible for this widely known as the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, America for Americans, meaning let the Europeans do what they need to do. We look after our own affairs. We don't want anything to do with Europe. They're crazy. Let us do our own thing in America. Thank you very much. Which, in no small part, led to American part of the League of Nations, the forerunner to the United Nations. Another failure, because eventually Hitler and Mussolini walked out of that one as well. The point, though, is that we're back in the 19th century, where you have these superpowers, not just one or two. Hyper superpower, the mega superpower that was the United States. Nobody will dispute that. America was the single nation on, no doubt, right? But things changed. Russia, the Russian Federation under Putin, and you need a strong leader, male or female, doesn't really matter, but a strong leader to make that happen. So Putin built Russia back up internationally, economically and all that stuff, right? He's a strong leader. In China, they have a strong leader now. He's just been reelected. He just no, I don't like to go. I'll stay, and I'll change whatever I have to change to stay. So they have another strong leader there, right? So you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got the United States, you still got the European Union as a power bloc. Germany is probably Britain. You can't discount the British. You have rising nations, right? You get to some extent India, in my opinion, Brazil, again a long road, and you've got other nations that are popping up. Japan, economically speaking, Japan is they're going into space, and they're going to start arming themselves again. We have what in the 19th century, same situation, a club, a chaotic amalgamation of nations vying for power, okay? Because there's no clear superpower now. There are many powers that are very powerful. There are rising powers. There are other considerations. It's very interesting. And space, in my opinion, it has replaced, I guess, the African or even the Asian continent in terms of colonization. So I think what we're seeing, what we're going to see, unless there are other things at play, is a race to space, right? And over the next 20, 30, 40 years, trying to colonize outer space, space stations, the moon, the asteroids, and then the planets and so forth. This is the official story anyway. But that's what's going to... And right now, that something that didn't really exist as much, maybe the British East India companies is a exception, is the private sector. You now have private concerns that are as powerful as nations. And I don't mean that just from a pure financial point of view, right? I agree. So you look at Tesla, right? Or Elon Musk, for example, right? Or Red Bull, for example. These two companies have space programs, right? They have space programs.
Virgin Galactic.
Where nation states have failed, yeah. Exactly, right? It is now like the private entities are as strong a player or as strong players as the nation states, right? In some instances, maybe stronger, right? Depending on because they're not only are they strong right now, but they probably will remain strong because they are expanding and they've got research and development. There's a lot of stuff that these, because they only exist for one reason, for the most part, is profit. Right? They have to remain profitable, otherwise they go under. Whereas a nation state can go bankrupt, no worries. That's fine. Let's go to war. Let's go to war. I'm bankrupt. Let's go to war.
That's right. But can I add that the nation states are limited geographically, where these companies are not.
That's right. That's a good point. In fact, that was one of the I guess the offshoots of globalism, the creation of entities, legal entities that could enter space, as we see now, right? In fact, choosing where they want to be based on tax considerations, cheap labor, things like are you familiar with slime molds? Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about slime molds. So they're fungi, mushrooms. Mushrooms we think of as stationary, right? Like think of nation states as mushrooms. There they are, they grow and they sprout, and all of a sudden you got lots of nation states, they're popping up everywhere, but they're pretty much locked in place, right? They're locked in place. That's where they are. They're not going to move around too much. They might, send some spores and colonize, but the nation state, the mushroom, is where it is, right? And it, it might grow bigger and, try to, take over other mushrooms' territories by growing bigger, but it might not. But anyway, so that's the mushroom. The slime mold, also in the same family of critters, is mobile. It literally is slime. It's a slimy puddle. It moves around the forest floor, digesting plant matter and whatnot as it goes along, right? That's the corporation. It can move around to wherever it wants to go. It grows little mushrooms, right? And then it spores, right? So our corporations are like slime mold. Can move around and then just go wherever it's good. Here I am. I'm going to stay here to grow a mushroom. I'm going to become a nation state, whatever, and I'm going to, spore. Poof. It's actually a really valuable analogy to think of it that way, because for the most part, mushrooms, too bad, right? You can have a war, expand your territory, but still you're stuck. Whereas the corporation is completely mobile. It can go anywhere. There's actually nowhere it needs. Nowhere, there's no mythology it needs, right? It's actually a sort of a segue to the topic. It doesn't need the mythology to exist. Nation states like Germany, Japan, France, Great Britain, they all have to have a mythology that ties them to the land they inhabit, that gives them a right to the land they inhabit. It's in Germany it's called Blut and Boden, blood and earth. Our blood soaks this ground. We must be here. The Jews did something very similar when they wanted to return to Israel. Well, it's in our homeland, 5,000 years ago. We have a very strong claim on this country. It was Palestine then, but we have a very strong claim. So it's these mythologies that are invoked to justify land grabs. Really, that's what it is. A corporation doesn't need that. Corporation doesn't care. Whatever. Man. Whatever. My mythology is dollar and Bitcoin and ruble and gold and whatever else, right? Industrial capital. That's my mythology. And I will go wherever the environment, right? The surrounding situation is most pleasant and most profitable and most advantageous to me. That's where I will be. I can even separate myself. So I can go, a little bit of me is over here, a little bit of me is over there, and here and there and everywhere, right? So that's the power of the nation state. It's sort of decentralized in a way. So rolling forward then, what came out of the 19th century was what we're discussing today. And we're seeing the movement again. In times of chaos, and that's why we're not just bringing the show to support Hitler Lives, which is a great movie. You should watch it. It was put together by great friends of the shows. Hitler Lives. We're bringing it to highlight the danger we're in right now. While it's not exactly the same, it is. The international situation we find ourselves in has got a lot of parallels to the international situation we find ourselves in before World War I. Okay, with differences, and the corporations here are one of those, or is one of the differences. But it's timely to understand this. What happens in times of people become polarized, and that's exactly what we're seeing. To the right, to the left, arbitrary designations, so nationalistic and conservative, or on the other side you get socialist, if you will, even though there aren't really any true communist nations left on this planet, not really. But certainly there's a polarization, and people are looking for leaders. People are looking to strong leaders, and that's who they are voting for. Right. These are all very strong leaders. Now, are they polarizing? Oh, yeah. You think Donald Trump doesn't polarize even the United States? Come on. Of
Gun
course.
control.
You think everybody in Russia thinks Putin is awesome?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? No, but it's true. So the problem, of course, is with that you get strong leaders, and then men and women both. It can become very difficult to reach a consensus. It becomes very difficult to steer through this diplomatically. Very tough, especially if not everybody is a rational player. Now, a rational player in game theory is all of us. We should all be rational players, meaning we self-interest. That's not always true. That is not always true. So game theory, leaves us wanting here. And economics as well assumes we're all rational players. It's not true. People are not rational players by definition. But most social sciences, assume that we are. Big mistake. So where we are now is a very chaotic, and it gets worse, Dave. I'll tell you why. Let me tell you why it gets worse.
Please tell me
because
why.
something that technology, our advances in technology are completely off the rails. Right? We are going into areas where we should maybe take a little stop here and think about what we should do. Go and research this, and should we go and build that? Like you said, this new ICBM and the hypersonic missile that is unstoppable. Well, maybe not, but then again, it'll be done because it can be done. So the advances that we're seeing in genetics, in fact, quantum computing, right? Hello? So what did you give me here? But the point is that this is complicating things. We have never ever, as a species, in known memory, in known history, advanced as quickly as we do today. Never ever have we seen as much change, as much development, new technology come around as we're seeing right now. My grandfather bought a bicycle which he could have had for his whole life. Right? You are going to buy a mobile phone that's going to cost you next year. In fact, you probably have to buy one because you can no longer use it because it's completely out of date.
Wait till
and that's
5G.
getting faster and faster and faster.
Like we're just about to buy.
So what?
We're just about to buy a brand new range of phones that have come out this year, and 5G is already being rolled out. These new phones don't have it, so we'll have to wait a whole another year before we can use that.
Exactly. That's nuts. That is nuts. We have got something called built-in obsolescence now, meaning the products that you buy have a shelf life that is very limited, right? Very, very. It's actually built that way. Now, one final point on this. Right now, it's a very, very critical time, right? Very critical time. I don't think we're that far from singularity. I honestly don't think we are that far. If quantum computing is a thing, right? If that actually happens, singularity is going to be the next thing. The one thing stopping us now from creating true artificial intelligence is computing power, right? And the physical limitations of silicon, right? With the new materials, as well as the computing concept or framework, that no longer is the case. We will now be able to create true artificial intelligence. Dave, you just put something in the chat here.
Right before I get
Mystery
to that.
updated. Don't panic, but
that's okay.
Go.
No, just before I get to that, I wanted to add graphene. As all of the new materials, and we announced it here first all those years ago, that graphene was going to be a game changer. They're now making true sheets of it, and it's only 1 atom thick. And we don't have, even silicon, we can't get down to 1 atom thick. But thinking about how you might be able to utilize graphene as a 1 atom thick processor layer, that's something completely new.
It is.
It's
Absolutely.
one of those. It's one of those game changers. And you hear me say this all the time. In the technical world, we call it a disruptor. So something brand new comes to the fore, And it's such a game changer, it's called a disruptor, because the other businesses had thought their product was awesome. Let's bring in the old, what's it called? BlackBerry. BlackBerry was everywhere. Everyone had one. This disruptor was the iPhone.
Yep.
And that changed the planet. Does anyone have a BlackBerry? I see everyone put their hands to their ankles, right? No one's put their hand up. So we moved away from it. One of those things was graphene. Now, the thing I pasted to Mackie here in our chat, because we have our private chat while we're on air, and this is headlined "Mystery Updated," because Mackie and I have been bringing to you part of the hypothesis, which is a culmination of information from all of the cleverest, they science, Mickey, the most clever scientists and people on the planet. See how I did that? And that is that
well done.
they have come to the conclusion, with the amount of information that's been presented to them, once again, confirmation bias excluded, and that is that we're living in some kind of artificial reality. Now, this news story came out. It says, "Don't panic, but physicists in Australia just proved reality doesn't exist." It's a great story. I'm going to put that into the chat room.
Share it.
I'm going
Read it up.
Yeah, okay. So get ready to have your mind blown. According to an experiment led by 2 physicists in Australia, reality doesn't exist. Turn on, tune in, and drop out, man. Because the world as you know it is all kinds of weird, at least on a quantum level. And this is the view of the quantum world that doesn't make anything look real. Andrew Truscott and Roman Kakimov of the Australian National University used atoms to put a John Wheeler delayed choice thought experiment to practical use. And we've spoken about this delayed choice before. This is the top hat game, where you add you make a molecule pretty much, and you try to put it through squeeze it through something that it won't fit on, and the way to tell, which is the delayed choice, results in it kept it on its head, the top hat, though it couldn't fit through the gap, and took the left lane, the skinny lane. No, it's very, very cool. You should read more about it. The Wheeler thought experiment asked, in theory, at what point does an object decide to act like one thing or another? That's either the wave or the quantum decoherence into a particle again. Truscott and Kakimov's team used what is assumed to be extremely expensive and complex scientific equipment to trap a single helium atom and then drop it through a pair of laser beams that formed a scattered grating pattern. Other sets of lasers were then added at random intervals to recombine the beams, which, on a quantum level, made it seem like the single atom had travelled 2 different paths along the beams. When the second set of lasers was taken away, the atom seemed as if it only chose to go through one beam. Are you still with us? Does it hurt yet? Quantum physics is known to do that. The story goes on, but I have to tell you that this is that kind of thing where the delayed choice means it happened in arrears. Time travel. That there is no time. Is that crazy? That's crazy, Mekki. I throw it to Mekki, he's not there. According to Truscott, if one chooses
it's
to
crazy,
believe
Chris.
that the atom really did take a particular path or paths, then one has to accept that the future measurement is affecting the atom's past. The atoms did not travel from A to B. It was only when they were measured at the end of the journey that their wave-like or particle behavior was brought into existence. This is that thing. This is what they've discovered. We've been talking about it, and that is the viewer collapses the experiment or makes the thing get rendered in this computer environment we seem to be in. Remember, in a computer game, if you're not looking at something, it isn't rendered by the graphics engine. Make sense? So it's still there in code.
Mm-hmm.
It's still doing whatever it's doing, but no one's looking at it, and therefore it's not rendered. If we have a particle and we shoot it somewhere, we know it's a particle. It weighs something. It's a thing. It magically turns into nothing.
Yeah. So,
unless we decide to look at it, and therefore it becomes rendered. Mackie, back to you in the studio.
and but that's exactly the point. That's so the experiment itself was actually conducted 3 years ago. Right? It was June 2015, and this is what they were saying. In fact, Andrew Truscott, one of the physicists that led the experiment, said this. This is what he said as a quote. It proves, now this experiment that Dave has just described, it proves that measurement is everything. At the quantum level, reality exists if you're not looking at it. Always hate me a lot when I say the observer effect and, it's double slit and, unless you measure it, it isn't there. Now, quantum physicists or research physicists are not agreeing with me, saying, yes, that's actually right, Mackie. I'm not saying, yeah, Mackie, you got it. That didn't happen. No, but the point is that it seems, right? It seems that unless we measure something, and this goes back again to quantum decoherence. Bear with me just for a second here. Unless we measure something, right, the state of existence is superposition. All right, what is that? So let's again talk about this single atom we just talked about. Helium, it doesn't really matter, whatever. Single atom, boom, there it is. If you don't measure its and knowing what it's doing, it does everything and nothing. Meaning it exists in a superposition of all possible states. Right? And then it becomes a game of probability as to which one will be. And then it will fall into, decohere into expected reality matrix we inhabit. Yeah? Because our reality is the most probable. Why? Because it's here. I know that sounds like really spurious reasoning, but that's essentially what happens. So the quantum decoherence, as it happens, right, selects the most probable outcome for the atom, whatever it might be, right, helium, whatever, okay, to exist in. And it so happens that by consensus, we are the measurement. It does need a person or someone looking at measurement, right? We have all this. Our reality is the most likely because we're in it, and we have been indoctrinated into it since birth, right? And our makeup is such that we live in this reality and have certain thought processes which are dictated by our biology. Why should that be? But it is. That's how it is. So do you see the leaps here and the steps? It is really quite astounding, and thank you, Dave, for bringing that up again. That is the essence of the hypothesis. We are responsible for the reality we inhabit collectively, right? Now, there was a very interesting story I once read about an ontologist, not oncologist, ontologist, a scientist that concerns himself with the science of being, or the question of being, if you will. And essentially, what the story postulated is that, reality, in fact, is a consensus decision, and whatever we, as a consensus, and the majority of us decide reality is that thing. So, at some point, the Earth was flat. That's what we all believed it was. It was flat. At some point, the Sun rotated around the Earth because we believed it did. It doesn't. Right? Now, of course, I shoot massive holes into that story. But the point is not as valid. This construct we have, this reality, it only exists because we make it so. We bring it into existence every single moment, every breath we take, everything we look at. Okay? Every time we open our eyes, it's astounding. I mean, it's impossible to escape it, right? Because it is so all-pervading, and nobody would question it. The movie The Matrix, and by the way, that goes way back to years ago. Plato, Matrix. So the Wachowski brothers should pay some royalties to play this sentence. Maybe help reason about that. But the point is that this Matrix movie, again, and the thought is, they're not new thoughts, they're old thoughts, lays it bare. That's why it was such a compelling and game-changing movie. There's so many imitations after that. So many people try to make Matrix-like movies, right? Because it spoke to a lot of people. What is the Matrix? The Matrix is the world that has been pulled, said to Neo in the movie. Very true. It's the world that has been pulled over your eyes. That's exactly what. That's the same as the people sitting in the wall and looking at the shadows that dance on the cave wall. That's the real world. Shadows over there. That's it. That's the real world. And that's what someone escapes from the cave and looks at the real world. Oh my God, the real world is very. Oh, look at this. Goes back to the cave. Tries to help his fellow cave dwellers, and they proceed to beat him to death. When you have people that don't conform, you beat them to death. We all have to agree. This is the reality. This is why I love. This is why I love all of this. These thought constructs. It is. But the thing is, this, Dave, it's a real thing. We're not talking about anymore. My audio's bad.
No, it's coming and going. But anyway, so we've only got we've got
sorry.
like 2 minutes until the top of the show.
I turned the video off. All right, talk us to the end, my friend. You go ahead. I'm sorry, everybody, if my audio isn't up to scratch.
It's okay. It just seems like it became degraded, Meki. That's all, over time. So, however,
right.
I don't want your point to be lost. And I'd like you just to reflect on that point again as soon as we come back from the break. But I think Meki's right. Not I think, I know Meki's right. And this has been the hard thing for us. I think for the most part we have attempted to ignore it. The messages have been there for a long time, but we've chosen not to know about it, chosen not to care, chosen to accept that where we're living is fine, what we're doing is fine. And I love that Agent Smith quote that, we made a paradise and your brains couldn't cope with it. You didn't like paradise. So we recreated it again to be in conflict. Because that's the way you seem to like it. What? There's the music. We're going to have a short station break. Here's some ads. Subscribe to the archives and we'll see you right after this short break.
Slips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And Meki's back with Shiny Side Out.
Hello.
There he is.
Hello.
Yeah. So I'll read us then.
Yes. No. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome back to Shiny Side Out with. You're in.
Yeah, you're getting some there's some artifacts there in the voice. You're back with David Meki's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com or Revolution Radio or revolution.radio on the #1 listener supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5.95 per month. Meki and I would like to say hello and greet and thank everyone who has liked us, followed us, or I don't know what other buttons you can press, subscribed to our our radio. If you're a newcomer, go back to the archives and catch up. There's not that many to listen to. Insert maniacal laughter here. We're halfway through show 312. Pause for Meki.
210 and 300.
Awesome. 300. I like how I can read the directions in the square brackets. We're actually talking about occultism and Nazism. And this is show number 2 in that series or show arc. We have a lot of show notes to go through. It's going to take quite a number of shows to get through, but it's an in-depth look, and I would respectfully understand if it isn't for everybody, if it's not your taste. But I'll tell you, in very small conversations that I've had with people, they have not had a deep understanding. Oh, the Nazi Party killed Jews, blah, 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 rise to power, swastika. And that's pretty much the end of it. They don't understand how it came about. They don't understand what was behind the Nazi Party. They don't understand the occultism connection. And some of the things that Meki and I spoke about last week, and so you probably want to go back to part 1, was something that's really close to my heart, and that's the Sumerian text, Sanskrit text. You know, we talk about Sitchin having a particular translation of those texts in favor of his belief. Now, he developed his belief as a result of the translation. We don't know. However, Meki, I was surprised, as you were, that the Germans had been, I don't want to say Nazis, they're not really Nazis at this point. The Germans had done research, and they'd found that our DNA was meddled by the Anunnaki. Meddled with. Now, if that's a surprise to you, all of the Abrahamic religions' texts seem to have their origin in that Sumerian text. You replace the word Anunnaki for God, and it all fits. You know, in the Bible, it says God created man from his likeness. Well, that's really funny, because the Sumerian text, which is actually the original text, says the same thing. Is it not surprising? Really? It also says they made the first black-headed people. And they did that, and it even tells them the motive, why they did it. So, that's why it's close to me. I found that out, and I found that was a surprise. Meki has enlightened us quite often with the connection to our modern films about history, where, and many times Meki brings, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark into this, but that's a window on what was actually happening about this collection around the world of everything that you could possibly think of that was either magical, ancient tech, ancient theories, ideas, and writings to gauge what was the world all about. And we've been trying to do the same thing. Meki and I, not saying we're going to start our own...
Look, that's exactly right.
Our own party. Meki, over to you.
No, that's exactly right. The one thing I'd like to say to, in support of what Dave has just shared with us is if you look at the Sumerian texts, and then you look at the Bible and the Torah and all the other following texts or texts that followed after, it's like reading the source material. The Sumerian cuneiform tablets, for all their age, are a lot more than any of the other writings following it. There's a lot more in it as far as background is concerned, why things happen, two people were, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So it's almost like the people that put together all the other texts knew those texts, they had read them, or whatever had been exposed to them clearly made a big impression on them. And then they had only, I guess, maybe incomplete or imperfect memories to pen their own story. You know, they got most of the stuff right, but the finer details were completely lost, which is what you would expect if a civilization is destroyed, for example, and then, you know, some people survive, you know, maybe some trading posts, and they try to claw their way back into some form of semblance of a civilization. So that was just one point I wanted to make about the Sumerian texts, just a lot more detailed than what has followed after. And another important thing is, the reason we're talking about this, you know, the Nazis, it led them to look far and wide for things, like Dave said, the Raiders of the Lost Ark and so forth, right? That actually happened, and we're going to talk about that as well. And it's really important to understand that it spurred these expeditions, this interest of in the East. The occult just means the hidden. The occultist, the word actually means the hidden stuff. It's hidden, right? But a lot of expeditions were undertaken in Far East by the Nazis into the Himalayas, right, into the Middle East, looking for things, looking for something, right? And as we learned last week, that grew out of this wrapped the European continent in the late 19th century, and you can argue that it was part of, you know, the part reason was expansion of the British Empire, Napoleon's recent forays into Egypt, opening up that country again, you know, to Europe. It's really important that we understand this, because what we're going to talk about in a later, in a later number of shows, probably in 3 or 4 shows time, are some of the scientific breakthroughs and some of the really toward the end of World War II and then after World War II, especially around a single person, Hans Kammer, who just disappeared, and who was one of the most important men in Nazi Germany. Let's get started. Today's show, occultism, rune. You're all familiar with runes. You know, these are the Nordic letters, if you will, and you've all seen them. Influenced by Guido von List and Lanz von Liebenfels, a new Aryan occultist movement was started after 1900 Germany by Rudolf John Gorsleben. Since the esoteric importance of the runes, that first had been developed by Guido von List, was central to his worldview, Godric Clark speaks in this context of rune occultism. Here, 2 authors stand out, as they engaged the runes in a less explicitly Aryan racist context. Friedrich Bernhard Marby and Siegfried Adolf Kummer focused more on the practical side of rune occultism. In 1930s, Friedrich Bernhard Marby was arrested and sent to a concentration camp, first to Flossenburg and then later to Dachau. He survived and resumed his occult research after the war. Responsible for his incarceration might have been Karl Maria Willigut, who was Himmler's counselor on the occult. Himmler's counselor on the occult. That was actually a position. Willigut was of the opinion that Marby and also Kummer, we just mentioned, were bringing the holy Aryan heritage into disrepute on the Aryan racist context. Willigut also had identified Irmanism as the true ancestral religion, claiming that Guido von List's Wotanism, which is really the worship of Odin, and runic role was a schismatic false religion, but this does seem to be unconnected to the rest of Marby. Other measures against esoteric groups were most probably the result of the general Nazi policy of suppressing lodge organizations. Now you have to understand, again, like we mentioned last time, if you are an oppressive regime, you cannot allow any organization to exist that could potentially undermine you. So you must make them illegal, you must destroy them, you must kill the members, you must do whatever you can to get rid of them. There were other developments at the time. In the years following the military defeat, which is, we're talking World War I, there was a burgeoning occult movement in Germany and Austria. Significant figures in that milieu were Gustav Meyring, Franz Spunder, and Perit Shaw. Now again, it is important to understand what happens. Things are concerned. What happens is that in times of uncertainty, people will reach for any straw. They will polarize, like we said earlier. They will go ahead and try to find answers in astrology, in the occult. My own family has deep roots in that kind of thing, and during World War II, my grandmother was doing the cards, not tarot, but she was just reading cards, and a high-ranking military was panicking. Oh my God, it's another thing, it's just this is going to be the nail right in the coffin. He just came to have his cards read too. Something similar happened in Poland after the war when they lived there. Everybody needs something to hold on to, and that's really more testament to the power of religion. Now, there was also suppression of Freemasonry and esotericism in those years. The suppression of Freemasonry in Nazi Germany also reached a level of outright persecution. It is estimated that between 80,000 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered under the Nazi regime. Between Theory was founded in a concentration camp. I'm back.
Yep.
Concentration camp. Freemasons who were sent to concentration camps were sent there as political prisoners, and consequently forced to wear an inverted red triangle. So the Star of David that the Jews were forced to wear, they had designation for every group in Nazi Germany in the camps, right? And the reverted red triangle here is a political prisoner. But everybody else that was there, who was not Jew, like a gypsy, for example, they all had their own symbols. Within the Nazi ideology, it was alleged that Freemasonry was part of the Jewish conspiracy. Since many esoteric groups emulated the knot structure of Freemasonry, they were caught in the National Socialist Anti-Masonic Law of 1935. Even the German Order was done, protesting to the last that they were not Freemasons, but good German Druids. I'm a good German Druid. Sorry. In her biography of Richard Walter Dahl, the historian Anna Bramwell also remarks that a secret society called the Skald Order was banned by the Nazis after 1938 because of its allegedly Masonic nature. Several members of the Skald Reich, including Dr. Rudolf Hase, founder member of Skald, and Theodor Gross, all came under covert investigation, though Backe is said to have been cleared of disloyalty by Heydrich from his deathbed. Whether the Nazi ideology had a special view concerning the various esoteric doctrines, aside from confusing them with Freemasonry, is not clear. Concerning anthroposophy, a book whose title denounced Rudolf Steiner as a fraud and a false prophet had been published by Gregor Schwarz-Bostonich in 1930. Schwarz-Bostonich had been an enthusiastic anthroposophist from 1923, but was disaffected by 1929 and later joined the SS. Astrology, interestingly, was officially interdicted in Nazi Germany after 1938. That's another thing my grandmother was really good at, astrology. However, the Nazis had sympathizing astrologers write favorable interpretations for psychological warfare. And as late as 1936, Hitler personally sent a greetings telegram to an international astrologers congress that was taking place in Düsseldorf. The full focus of the state was not aimed until June 9, 1941, when Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the security police, banned lodge organizations and esoteric groups in the wake of the flight to Scotland by Rudolf Hess, who had been attracted and influenced by the organic farming theories of Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. However, the suppression of esoteric organizations began very soon after the Nazis acquired governmental power. Dr. Anna Bramwell points out that occultist racialists were banned as early as 1934. Allegedly, the stage magician and occultist Franz Bardon had attracted the notice of Adolf Hitler, like other workers for the light, and was incarcerated in a concentration camp for 3.5 months in 1945. Dave, the modern mythology of Nazi occultism.
Thank you very much. There is a persistent idea, widely canvassed, in a sensational genre of literature that the Nazis were principally inspired and directed by occult agencies from 1920 to 1945. Appendix E of Goodrich Clark's book is entitled The Modern Mythology of Nazi Occultism. In it, he gives a highly critical view of much of the popular literature on the topic. In his words, these books describe Hitler and the Nazis as being controlled by a hidden power, characterized either as a discarnate entity, e.g. black forces, invisible hierarchies, unknown superiors, or as a magical elite in a remote age or distant location. He referred to the writers of this genre as crypto-historians. The works of the genre he wrote were I'm having such a bad day today, were typically sensational and under-researched. A complete ignorance of the primary sources was common to most authors, and inaccuracies and wild claims were repeated by each newcomer to the genre until an abundant literature existed, but on wholly spurious facts concerning the powerful Tula society, the Nazi links with the East, and Hitler's occult initiation. In a new preface for the 2004 edition of the Occult Roots, Goodrich Clark comments that in 1985, when his book first appeared, called Nazi Black Magic, was regarded as a topic for sensational authors in pursuit of strong sales. In his 2002 work, Black Sun, which was originally intended to trace the survival of occult Nazi themes in the post-war period, Goodrich Clark considered it necessary to readdress the topic. He devotes one chapter of the book to the Nazi mysteries, as he terms the field of Nazi occultism there. Other reliable summaries of the development of the genre have been written by German historians. The German edition of the Occult Roots includes an essay, Nationalsozialismus und Occultismus, National Socialism and Occultism, which traces the origins of the speculation about Nazi occultism back to the publications of or from the late 1930s, and which was subsequently translated by Goodrich Clark into English. The German historian Michael Ribman was also included a longer excursus about National Socialism in his acclaimed book on Adolf Hitler's religious beliefs. According to Goodrich Clark, the speculation of Nazi occultism originated from post-war fascination with Nazism. The horrid fascination of Nazism upon the Western mind emerges from the uncanny interlude in modern history that it presents to an observer a few decades later. The idolization of Hitler in Nazi Germany, its short-lived dominion on the European continent, and Nazism's extreme anti-Semitism set it apart from other periods of modern history. Outside a purely secular frame of reference, Nazism was felt to be the embodiment of all evil in a modern 20th century regime. A monstrous pagan relapse of the Christian community of Europe. By the early 1960s, one could now clearly detect a mystique of Nazism, a sensationalistic and fanciful presentation of figures and symbols shorn of all political and historical context, gained ground with thrillers, non-fiction books and films, and permeated the milieu of popular culture. Neki.
That's right. No, these are names. relating to Nazi occultism. So take it with a grain of salt. Now, one of the earliest claims of Nazi occultism can be found in Louis Spence's book Occult Causes of the Present War, written in 1940, so clearly talking about World War II. According to Spence, Alfred Rosenberg and his book The Myth of the 20th Century were responsible for promoting pagan, occult, and anti-Christian ideas that motivated the Nazi Party. Demonic possession of Hitler. For demonic influence in Hitler, Hermann Rauschening's Hitler Speaks is brought forward source. However, most modern scholars do not consider Rauschening reliable. As Nicholas Goodwin Clark summarizes, recent scholarship has almost certainly proved that Rauschening's conversations were mostly invented. Look, I don't know. I read that book, actually, Hitler Speaks, and there's actually Hitler's Table Talk. Look, if you haven't read it, read it, see what you think. It's a fascinating read. It really is. It was just like a, sort of like a diary or diarization of the conversations that Hitler had at the dinner table. Similar to Rauschening, August Kubitschek, one of Hitler's closest friends since childhood, claims that Hitler, 17 years old at the time, once spoke to him of returning Germany to its former glory. Of this comment, August said, "It was as if another being spoke out of his body and moved him." An article, Hitler's Forgotten Library, by Timothy Ryback, published in the Atlantic in May 2003, mentions a book from Hitler's private library, authored by Dr. Ernst Schattel. Schattel, whose interests were flagellation, dance, occultism, nudism, and BDSM, had also been active as an activist for sexual liberation before 1933. He had been imprisoned in Nazi Germany for 7 months, and his doctoral degree was revoked. He's supposed to have sent magic, history, theory, and practice to Hitler sometime in the mid-20s. Hitler is said to have marked extensive passages, including one which reads thusly: "He who does not have the demonic seed within himself will never give birth to a magical world." Theosophist Alice A. Bailey stated that during World War II, Adolf Hitler was possessed by what she called dark forces. Her follower, Benjamin Cream, has stated that through Hitler and a group of equally evil men around him in Nazi Germany, together with a group of militarists in Japan and a further group around Mussolini in Italy, was released the energies of the Antichrist, which according to Theosophical is not an individual person, but forces of destruction. According to James Herbert Brennan in his book Occult Reich, Hitler's mentor Eckhart, to whom Hitler in fact dedicated Mein Kampf, wrote to a friend of his in 1923, "Follow Hitler, he will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. We have given him the means of communication with them. Do not mourn for me. I shall have influenced history more than any other German." Now, what you've just heard is a collection of completely anecdotal pieces of information, which speak to very interesting, if you will. Is it possible that Hitler was in fact influenced by forces outside of himself? It is hard to argue against the fact that Hitler was the most influential person of the 20th century, by far. And I don't mean this in a positive way, but he shaped the 20th century and the face of the planet like nobody else. Is it that far-fetched to assume that someone acted for him? I don't know. Which for you guys to convert. Certainly, it's a very interesting thought experiment. Over to you, Dave. Hello, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Hello?
I'd muted myself. So we're talking about the New World Order?
Oh, okay.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, perfect. I'm just trying
Yes,
to
it is.
improve the sound quality however I can do it. Okay, so The New World Order. Conspiracy theorists frequently identified German National Socialism, or inter alia, as a precursor of the New World Order, with regard to Hitler's later ambition of imposing a national socialist regime throughout Europe. Nazi propaganda used the term Neurodnung, often poorly translated as the New Order, while actually referring to the restructurization of the state borders on the European map with the resulting post-war economic hegemony of Greater Germany. So one could probably say that the Nazis pursued a New World Order in terms of politics. But the claim that Hitler and the Tula Society conspired to create a New World Order, a conspiracy theory put forward on some web pages, is completely unfounded. This takes us to Aleister Crowley. There are also unverifiable rumours that the occultist Aleister Crowley sought to contact Hitler during World War II, despite several allegations and speculations to the contrary. For example, Giorgio Gali. There is no evidence of such an encounter. In 1991, John Simmons, one of Crowley's literary executors, published a book, The Medusa's Head, or Conversations Between Aleister Crowley and Adolf Hitler, which has definitively been shown to be literary fiction. That the edition of this book was limited to 350 also contributed to the mystery surrounding the topic. Mention of a contact between Crowley and Hitler without any sources or evidence is also made in a letter from René Gounod to Julius Evola, dated October 29, 1949, which later reached a broader audience. Mekki, let's talk about Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill, yeah, look, there's not about him, but certainly a very interesting character, Winston Churchill himself. But this is what he wrote in his memoir, Moloch. Hitler had conjured up the fearful idol of an all-devouring Moloch, of which incarnation. Now, in conclusion, this particular, we go into Heinrich Himmler and the SS, Nazi mysticism, occultism, and science fiction. Nazi mysticism in German culture is further expanded upon within Manfred Nagel's article Science Fiction, Occult Sciences and Nazi Myths, published in the journal Science Fiction Studies. In it, Nagel writes that the racial narratives described in contemporary German science fiction stories like The Last Queen of Atlantis by Edmund Kiss provide further notions of racial superiority under the auspices of Ariosophy, Arianism, and alleged historic racial mysticism, suggesting that writings associated with possible occultism, Ariosophy, or Arianism were products intended to influence and justify in a socio-political manner rather than simply establish cultural heritage. Now, we've spoken about this. This is me interjecting here. The Germans were hard-pressed to create a national, similar fashion as the Japanese were hard-pressed to create the same thing. So all of this was very fertile ground for Germany, I guess, right? The occult movement of the late 19th century brought with it the ideal setting to create a whole bunch of mystical and mythical narratives, reaching back to the Aryans, reaching back into the Asian continent, reaching into, Hyperborea and so forth. So that's actually the setting for all of this. Now, the stories, I'm going back to the text here, themselves dealt with heroes, charismatic leader types who had been chosen by fate, with the resources of a sophisticated and extremely powerful technology. Nagel considers science fiction pieces like Atlantis further persuasiveness of Nazi leaders such as Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler as further Nazi elite envisioning for itself in occupied East European territories. This in turn allegedly technology, summated by Nagel as a tremendous turning back of culture, away from the age of reason and consciousness toward the age of sleepwalking certainty, the age of rational magic, so beyond rational, if you will. Now, the funny thing is this, that's exactly where we are today. We are sleepwalking through our lives, watching infomercials, right, and infotainment, and tweeting away, and Snapchatting away. Now, just for a second, I'm truly terrified of that picture, because the conviction these people carried, and the intellectual resources they had at their disposal, and the belief of the people, even without technology. Now imagine having all of that, and iPods, and iPhones, and Androids, and the internet. Oh my goodness. Dave, talk about Heinrich Himmler.
Absolutely. So Heinrich Himmler and the SS, credited retrospectively with being the founder of esoteric Hitlerism, and certainly a figure of major importance for the officially sanctioned research and practice of mysticism by a Nazi elite, was Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler, who, more than any other high official in the Third Reich, including Hitler, was fascinated by Pan-Aryan, i.e. broader than Germanic, racialism. Himmler's capacity for rational planning was accompanied by an enthusiasm for the utopian, the romantic, and even the occult. It also seems that Himmler had an interest in astrology. He consulted the astrologer Wilhelm Wolff in the last weeks of the Second World War. One detailed but difficult source for this is a book written by Wolff himself, Tierkreis und Hakenkreuz, published in Germany in 1968, that Walter Schellenberg had discovered an astrologer called Wolff is mentioned in Hugh Trevor Roper's The Last Days of Hitler. In Bramwell's assessment, and there's a quote here, too much can be made of this importance of bizarre cultism in Himmler's activities, but it did exist. And one of the reasons behind the split between Himmler and Darrow that took place in the 1930s. Although Himmler did not have any contact with the Tula Society, he possessed more occult tendencies than any other Nazi leader. The German journalist and historian Heinz Hohn had, an authority on the SS, explicitly describes Himmler's views about reincarnation and occultism. The historic example of which Himmler used in practice as the model for the SS was the Society of Jesus, since Himmler found in the Jesuits what he perceived to be the core element of any order, the doctrine of obedience and the cult of the organization. The evidence for this largely rests on a statement from Walter Schellenberg in his memoirs, and that's page 39 in Cologne, 1956. But Hitler is also said to have called Himmler my Ignatius of Loyola. As an order, the SS needed a coherent doctrine that would set it apart. Himmler attempted to construct such an ideology, and to his purpose he deduced a pseudo-Germanic tradition from history. However, this attempt was not entirely successful. Hohner observes that Himmler's neo-pagan customs remain primarily a paper exercise, In 1936, in a 1936 memorandum, Himmler set forth a list of approved holidays based on pagan and political precedents and meant to wean SS members from their reliance on Christian festivities. The winter solstice, or Yuletide, was the climax for the year. It brought SS folk together at candlelit banquet tables and around raging bonfires that harked back to German tribal rites. The Alak, Julekse, or Yule Light, was made as a presentation piece for SS officers to celebrate the winter solstice. It was later given to all SS members on the same occasion, December 21st, made of unglazed stoneware. The Julekse was decorated, it's terrible pronunciation, was decorated with early pagan Germanic symbols. Himmler said, and I quote, "I would have every family of a married SS man to be in possession of this unglazed stoneware. Even the wife will, when she has left the midst of the church, find something else which her heart and mind can embrace." And lastly, only adherents of theories of Nazi occultism or the few former SS members who were, after the war, participants in the Landig group in Vienna, would claim that the cultic activities within the SS would amount to its own mystical religion. At the time of his death in 1986, Rudolf J. Mund was working on a book on the Germanic original race cult religion. However, what was indoctrinated into the SS is not known in detail. Mekki.
Yeah, look, there's quite a bit of mystery surrounding all of that, but we have some glimpses. Just very quickly, mentioned that Hitler called Himmler my Ignatius of Loyola. Now, just to be clear, Ignatius of Loyola started the order of the Jesuits. That's why there's this corroborating evidence between our this I guess mindset of awe as far as the Jesuits were concerned. And the correct pronunciation is actually the Allah Yule Leuchter, just being light, and Yule, of course, being Yuletide, or the Yule time. So that's all right though. That's a tough one. If you're not a German English speaker, yeah, you look at that word, you go, good Lord, what is that?
I say that a lot during our text.
Right, I know. I'm sorry. It's just I'll try to get the phonetic spelling next time. Yeah. So this gets me to the interesting bit, right? This is really what we are. This is a key thing that everybody needs to really listen to. In 1935, Himmler, along with Dara, established Ahnen, which means ancestor, inheritance. Well, loosely translated. It was actually a department in the government, Ahnenerbe. And at first independent, it became the ancestral heritage branch of the SS. Headed by Dr. Hermann Wirth, it was dedicated primarily to archaeological research, but it was also involved in proving the superiority of the Aryan race and in occult practices. A great deal of time and resources were spent on research, creating a properly accepted historical, cultural, and scientific background, so the ideas about a superior could be publicly accepted. For example, an expedition to Tibet was organized to search for the origins of the Aryan race. The expedition leader and Bega make face masks and skull and nose measurements. An expedition was sent to the Andes. Bramwell, however, commented of SS men to Tibet in order to search for Shangri-La. An expedition which made for espionage as its purpose. I completely disagree with that. Completely disagree. I think they were actually looking for Shangri-La. Okay, and why go to the Andes? Right? Why go to Tibet or the Himalayas for that fact and the Andes? Why? Because that's where we think, Dave and I, the hypothesis, That's where we think we will find remnants of the previous civilizations that were in fact on this planet proposed here. That's exactly what happened. I believe the Nazis found something. I do believe the Nazis found something. We'll get to that. The Schwarze Korps. The official newspaper of the SS was the Schwarze Korps, the Black Corps, published weekly from 1935 to 1945. In its first issue, the newspaper published an article on the origins of the Nordic race, emphasizing a location near the North Pole, similar to the theory of Hermann Wirth, but not mentioning Atlantis. Also in 1935, the SS Journal commissioned a professor of Germanic history, Heiner Schilling, to prepare a series of articles on ancient Germanic life. As a result, a book containing these articles, Leben, which means, Germanic life, was published by Köhler and Amelung of Leipzig with the approval of the SS and Reich government in 1937. 3 chapters dealt with the religion of the German people over 3 periods: nature worship and the cult of the ancestors, the sun religion of the late Bronze Age, and the cult of the gods. According to Heiner Schilling, the German peoples of the late Bronze Age had adopted a 4-spoke wheel as symbolic to the sun, into the modern swastika of own society, which represents the lightbringers of the Nordic race overran the lands of the dark inferior races, and there was no coincidence that the most powerful expression of the Nordic world was found in the sign of the swastika. Very little has been preserved of the ancient rites, Professor Schilling continued, but it was a striking fact that in many German, which were sort of like little provinces, today on Sonnenwendtag, which is solstice days, burning sun wheels are rolled from mountaintops down into where the Sonnenwendfeuer, which are the solstice fires, burn on those days. He concluded by saying that the sun is all highest to the children of the earth. Now, that is true. Germans have these solstice days celebrations. Again, that shouldn't be any relation to anyone, because a lot of the Christian holidays are just redressed pagan holidays. It's just it's what it is. It's the Saturnalia, right? Christmas and so forth. But this is really important. Now you can see that they went to some length to establish this fictional, mythological, national tie between the German blood and the German earth. Great lengths to realize that. The next one is very interesting, though, Dave. The Wewelsburg, which was the SS castle that Himmler, in fact, used.
Yes, I've seen multiple documentaries on this castle. Multiple. And pivotal times during the war, they would meet at this castle. Extraordinary. So Himmler has been claimed to have considered himself the spiritual successor or even in reincarnation of Heinrich the Fowler, having established special SS rituals for the old king and having returned his bones to the crypt at, is it Quedlinburg Cathedral? No answer from Becky. Himmler...
Keep going, dude. Good.
All right, cool. Himmler even had his personal quarters at, no, you said Wewelsburg.
Wewelsburg.
Thank you. Decorated in commemoration of Heinrich the Fowler. The way that SS redesigned the castle referred to certain characters of the Grail mythos. And if you more research there, you can look at the SS School House Wewelsburg. I keep saying it the same way. Himmler had visited the castle on the 3rd of November 1933 and April 1934. The SS took official possession of it in August of 1934. The occultist Karl Maria Willigut, known in the SS under the pseudonym Wiesthor, accompanied Himmler on his visits to the castle. Initially, the castle was intended to be a museum of officers' college for ideology education within the SS. but it was subsequently placed under direct control of the office of the Reichsfuhrer SS Himmler in February of 1935. The impetus for the change was the conception most likely that came from Willigut. Now, Mackie, I just have to add that they had, it's on the top of a mountain, is extremely difficult to get to. You couldn't have a bombing raid because of the high mountainous terrain. It's an extraordinary location. Do your research and have a look at it. I've seen shots from within it, and at the time it would have been amazingly adorned, huge fireplace, seating for heaps of people, and just an extraordinary location. It was like if you're an evil, villain from one of the Bond films. That would have been one of the entrance points to your cutout mountain castle. So, yeah, extraordinary thing.
I completely agree. It is truly a fortress in the best sense.
There's no land attack.
Which brings us to... No, forget it. Good luck to you.
Yeah, and the air attack was nearly impossible. So, yeah, it was a perfect location.
Oh, look, that's exactly right. Which brings us to another interesting subject, which is the S officers in Argentina. Now, Argentina, as you will call, is at the very tip of the South American continent, just a hop, skip, and a jump to the Antarctic, believe it or not. There are some accounts of SS officers celebrating solstice in ritual. In his book El Cuarto Lado Triángulo, I'm sure I put that, published in 1995, Professor Ronald Newton describes a number of occasions when a Sonnenwendfire occurred in Argentina. When SS Sturmbannführer Baron von Termann, Edmund Freiherr von Termann in fact, the new head of the German legation, arrived in December 1933. One of his first public engagements was to attend the NSDAP Sonnenwendfire at the house of Vicente Lopez in the suburbs of Buenos Aires. A neo-pagan festival with torches in which the Argentine Nazis greeted the winter and summer solstice. At another, in December 1937, 500 young people, mostly Hitler youth and Hitler maidens, were taken to a natural amphitheater dominating the sea in the south of the country. They lit great pillars of wood, and in the light of the flickering flames, diverse NSDAP orators lectured the children on the origins of the ceremony and sang the praises of the Nazis fallen for liberty. In March 1939, the pupils of the German school in Rosario, still in Argentina, were the celebrants on an island in the Paraná River, opposite the city. A rustic altar straight from Germanic mythology, yet young leaders enthroned with solemnity, the accompaniment of choral singing, the Creole of Argentina. The first great event promoted by the Nazis was the Sonnenwendfire at Charata on December 21, 1935. Portentous discourses of fire alternated with choral renderings. Activities continued in Argentina after the war. Uki Gonye, in his book The Real Odessa, published in 2003, describes how Jacques de Marie, war criminal, was a regular speaker at the pagan solar solstice, fugitive Nazis in post-war Argentina. There you go. Unbelievable. Which brings us to the occultists working for the SS, my friend. And you're probably...
It sure does. Carl Maria,
yes, no,
really good.
Really?
Of all the SS personnel, Carl Maria Willigut could be best described as a Nazi occultist. The first biography of him, written by Rudolf J. Mund, was titled Himmler's Rasputin. Wow, that's a title and a half. German Der Rasputin Himmler's, not translated into English. After his retirement from the Austrian military, Willigut had been active in the Arosophic milieu. Ariosophy was the only one of the threads of esotericism in Germany and Austria during this time. When he was involuntarily committed to the Salzburg mental asylum between November 1924 and early 1927, he received support from several other occultists. Villegut was clearly sympathetic to the Nazi revolution of January 1933. When he was introduced to Himmler by an old friend who had become an SS officer, he got the opportunity to join the SS under a pseudonym, Weisthor. He was appointed head of the department for pre- and early history within the race and settlement main office of the SS. His bureau could be described as the occult department of the SS. Villegut's main duty appears, and I quote, to have consisted in committing examples of his ancestral memory to paper. Okay, so maybe he made it up, we don't know. Villegut's work for the SS also included the design of the Totenkopfring, Death's Head Ring, that was worn by the SS members. He is even supposed to have designed a chair for Himmler. At least this chair and its covers are offered for sale on the internet. That's nice. Isn't that nice?
It's nice. It's nice. Which brings us to Otto Rahn.
With 2 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, in that case, look, we're not going to talk about Otto Rahn. We're going to talk about Otto Rahn next time. But look, you can see that there's a lot in here that points to the Nazis being extremely interested. 1, in the occult. 2, in expeditions. And these are not easily accessible places. Okay, so it's like, I mean, back then, air travel wasn't really a common thing. Okay, and remember that climbing up these mountains, they didn't have oxygen tanks. So if you send expeditions to the Andes and into the Himalayas, Tibet, you have to get some really fit people in there, right? Because there's no oxygen tanks that would help them climb up those really steep slopes.
Don't worry, the Sherpas carried their limp bodies on their backs and dumped them up there.
Hey, maybe they did. But my content find something. Be it in the end, where they did find something. A lot of money was spent doing this. Okay, and more than you would think is reasonable. Similar things we will find with our friend Hans Kammer when we talk about him and the amount of resources he had at command, which is odd considering where Germany was, at that particular point in time, losing the war. So the Germans pumped everything they had into him. But hey, guys, don't go away. Gerber is here, I'm sure, with an awesome roundtable, and donate. Can I know we have this support radio? Donate if you can. Come.